Hi, I'm Mike Thrussell, sea angling consultant to the Penn fishing tackle brand. With me today is Dennis Froud.
Hello.
Dennis is a well-known big game angler, but today we're going to talk wreck fishing for conger. Dennis, you based your boat, Aristocat, in Eastbourne. There's a very good reason. There's an awful lot of wartime wrecks out there.
Absolutely, Mike, yeah. The wreck we're going to fish today is 20 miles south of Beachy Head. She lays in the separation zone between the shipping channels, and it went down in 1915. 4,000 ton coal boat, collier, and it holds an awful lot of conger eels.
Let's talk a little bit about wreck fishing. Let's talk about the wrecks themselves. It strikes me, I've done quite a bit of conger fishing, like yourself, and the wrecks are important. It's the way they've actually broken up down there, isn't it? If you get a boat that's intact, it doesn't fish quite so well as one that's broken up. That's
very true. We find that the World War I wrecks are better preserved than the World War II wrecks because of the grade of steel. But the wreck that we're going to fish today, it's quite a long wreck. She's broken down at one end, so we'll be fishing the west running tide into the broken end of the wreck.
And obviously this is all at anchor?
Absolutely at anchor, yes.
And the reason we anchor is because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the smell from the bait to draw the conger out of the wreck.
That's absolutely correct, Mike, yeah.
But what about the big conger? Let's talk a little bit about conger themselves. I mean, some of the really big conger, they don't really come out of the wreck, do they? They're too big sometimes. They get in a hole, they grow that fat, they literally can't get out, and they just hit fish that come past.
That's very true, yeah. You just see the heads come out of the hidey hole and they just grab a bait as it goes by.
So what do you do with those then? I take it you sort of trotting the baits back to the wreck for those?
Yeah, we anchor the boat up tight of the wreck and drop our baits down and then bounce the baits back into the wreck. If you hook a fish that's actually in a hidey hole, you've just got to, once you've hooked him up, you've got to hang on put pressure on the fish until it actually swims out to you.
And what about tides? What about the state of tide, and the strength of tide? How does that affect how the conger feed?
Well, things are changing. Years ago, we always fished on slack water for conger, but now, the stronger the tide, the better the conger seem to feed.
And it's all about getting this scent back into the wreck where it really turns their stomach juices on, isn't it? That's what it's all about.
That's very true, yeah. The more bait you can get in the water, the better the action that you'll get.
A conger are a big, aggressive fish, but how big do you think they actually grow out there?
Well, we've had them here close to 100 pounds. They do grow much bigger than that. I've seen fish in the Azores that went 250 pounds on the fish market slab.
Okay, well, we've talked a little bit about conger there. Now we're going to move on to baits and to tackle. With conger eels being such big, aggressive, powerful fish, you need strong tackle, particularly when you're fishing into wrecks. And today I'm going to be fishing with a Wave Blaster 30-50 rod. I'm also actually field testing a new reel. It's called the TRQ, and it's a powerful multiplier built with really strong gears. It's a new concept in reels, exactly what you want for big conger. But it's built to international standards, the famous Penn International reels. And Dennis here, with his big game experience, has used Penn Internationals for a long time. And you've got a Penn International that's now, I believe, 25 years old?
I have indeed, Mike. This is a Penn International 12. I purchased this reel in 1985 while in Durban, South Africa. I've used it regularly ever since. I've caught some cracking fish, from 100-pound sailfish to 500-pound sharks on this reel. I'm now using it for general conger fishing on my boat because I've upgraded my big game reels to the new Penn 2-speeds. This is my personal conger tackle that I'll be using today. Penn reel, Penn rod, heavy mono trace to a 10-0 hook. We tend to use this heavy mono now for hook length instead of wire because we're releasing fish rather than gaffing and bringing fish into the fish market. So it's much easier to hold on to heavy nylon than it is to hold on to wire when you're releasing, taking the hook out with a T-bar.
Also, very interestingly, you use what's called a wind-on leader. Now, I've used them myself when I've been big game fishing, but they've never really caught on yet in the UK, but they are the best way to fish, aren't they?
Absolutely the best way to fish. I've been using wind-on leaders for big game fishing for years, and we now use them for conger fishing. It's a simple method. Take a length of Dacron, form your loop and feed your 200-pound mono into the Dacron. A couple of dobs of super glue to seal it off, and you have your wind-on leader. I put a sliding boom onto mine and finish with a link swivel and a crimp. And then the standard hook trace clips onto the link swivel, and away you go, you're fishing.
I think it's also worth mentioning too that the sliding link, this link that takes the lead weight that slides up and down on the trace, that's an important piece of equipment, isn't it? Because conger can be very, very delicate feeders, and sometimes you just have to feed them a little bit of line to keep them interested.
That's very true, Mike. Yeah, the conger, you feel the tap of the first bite as he mouths the bait. Then he gently pulls bait down. You've got to feed him a little bit of line till he gets the bait in his mouth. Conger is the only fish that can swim backwards, so once he's got the bait in his mouth, he tends to swim away from you backwards. Then when you feel the fish draw down, you can wind into the fish. When you've hooked your fish, you need to wind into the fish and get him swimming away from the wreck, because if you give him slack line or if you're hesitant, the fish will swim backwards straight back into the metalwork and you've lost it.
That brings me on nicely to drag settings, because a lot of people that fish for conger don't understand drag settings, and it's really important that you're able to put a lot of power on that fish, but you need to set it where under maximum rod compression the reel will just start to give line.
That's right. I personally like to see my rod bent in a 25% curve when it's pulling at 30% of the break-in strain of a line. I'm fishing line class for my conger, anything from 2-pound break-in strain up to 130-pound break-in strain, but it's very, very essential that you set your drag accordingly.
And this is also where the braided lines come in now, the modern braided lines, because the braided lines allow you to use less weight in the tide run. They take less weight to get down and hold bottom, but importantly they put maximum pressure on the fish. Yeah,
and other that as well, because it's so direct from rod tip to bait, you can feel every movement of the fish on the bait.
So important. There's some great tips there. We're going to move on now in this next segment, and we're going to look at baits. Now Dennis, baits. We all have our own different preferences, and I know that you prefer what's called a flapper mackerel bait or a flapper pouting bait.
That's correct.
Could you show me how to make one?
Yes, I can do that, Mike. Yeah, the traditional old favourite is the mackerel flapper. Just insert the knife and just run it gently down the backbone to the tail. Turn it over, insert the knife again, run it gently down, and then take out the backbone. It leaves you a bait that flaps in the tide. Now, I like to hook mine through the eyes, basically, straight through, and down we go. That will attract any decent conger, and even cod when they're on the wreck. That will take pretty much anything at all.
It does ooze a lot of juice, doesn't it?
It oozes a lot of juice, yeah. On days when mackerel is in short supply, you can always revert to the old faithful pouting. We catch these by the hundreds on wrecks. Again, I prefer to use a flapper bait, insert the knife down through and just gently run it down the bone, turn it over, insert the knife, gently run it down the bone, and take out the bone so that you're just left with the nice flappy bait and, of course, all the guts that can ooze out in the tide and attract the fish. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I tend to use the same baits too, I mean particularly the mackerel flappers, but what I find works really well for me, and it's purely a confidence thing I think, but I'm often looking to try and get a really big conger out, and the bait that works for me, I always try to get a fresh pouting, because my theory is that pouting are the main fish that the conger's going to be feeding on, so I try to give them what they want. And all I do is very simply just cut through, get some grip on this, you cut through the body at a diagonal, deliberately leaving the guts and all the juice to ooze out, and I simply take the hook, and so that I make sure I get a good clean hook up, I just pass the hook straight through the top lip like that to leave it fully exposed. You've got a big juicy bait.
Yep.
With the hook point well exposed. I find that so effective, and it works on big fish.
Oh, it does indeed. In fact, you'll find that pouting baits will actually attract much bigger conger than a mackerel bait.
Well, talking about big conger, we've talked about having, you know, heavy tackle for a big, heavy, aggressive fish, but it's not always needed, is it? Now, I believe you've got a record, a special record for big conger on very light tackle. That's
very true. I like to fish line class when I'm conger fishing, and the lightest I've ever gone is 2 pounds test line, and I hold the world record for conger at 20 pounds 4 ounces on a 2 pound test line.
That's amazing, absolutely amazing.
It's just a question of patience, Mike. Once you've hooked your fish, you just keep pumping, gently pumping, and keep him swimming.
And I think a little bit of skill too. Well, that concludes our tips and talk on tackle and conger. We're actually going to go out now and try and catch some of these beasts.